Hola, hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the University of Michigan SHIP Chapters podcast series. This is your host, Gabriella, and I am super excited to kick off our first episode today entitled Life After Graduation. Today, we will be talking with a University of Michigan SHIP alumni and discussing what their life has been like post-graduation. Let's welcome our first alumni on the podcast, Andrea Vallenilla. Andrea graduated in May 2022, majoring in electrical engineering and minoring in business. She's currently working at Texas Instruments in clocks and timing solutions as an applications engineer rotator. How are you doing, Andrea?
I am very good. To be quite honest, a little bit tired. Work has been something as of lately. How about you?
I'm doing good. Just trying to get through midterms here at the university at the moment. Where are you calling from?
I'm currently located in Mountain View, California.
Oh, wow. How's that going? How's the weather?
Actually, so funnily enough, the weather the past few days has been horrible, which is funny because in California we never get bad weather, or barely ever. But yeah, yesterday there was a windstorm. We actually lost electricity, and today it was cloudy. For
Oh,
God's sakes,
wow.
imagine.
Wow,
Compared
that's
to
crazy.
Michigan, that's cloudy all the time.
No, Michigan is currently undergoing a storm as well, so pretty
Oh
bad,
wow.
yeah, pretty bad situations either way. No, but sounds like a long day of work.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm just working on getting this automation done for our this lab test that I need to get data for to then fix an issue with one of our parts. But one of our chips, basically the TI or Texas Instruments designs. So been a lot of lab work and coding, which are not my favorite things, but it's part of the job at times.
Mhm. No, that's exciting to hear about. I mean, we'll get more into questions about professional life pretty soon, but I'm definitely going to ask you a little bit more about that. Um, I guess to get started off with the questions that we have, one of the first things I'm wondering is thinking back to when you were an upperclassman at the university, how are you feeling? Were you nervous about the future, or did you already have plans for post-graduation?
So I did have plans for post-graduation. Actually, when all of my senior year, I went through it with an offer at hand. So I never had to recruit, interview, nothing like that, which I did on purpose so I could enjoy my last year at college. To answer your question, your first question, I wasn't nervous, honestly. I was mostly excited. And especially towards the end of my second semester, I was a little bit ready to go. I think I had lived the college life that I wanted and I was ready to move on and do the new thing. Um, I was mostly nervous, I would say a week before moving out here to California. That for sure hit me a little bit. I had a little few breakdowns, etc. But yeah, I think overall to answer your question, I wasn't never nervous in terms of will I get a job because I already had one. Even before starting my senior year, I accepted my a full time from my internship with Texas Instruments. So yeah.
That's really impressive. To already have it since before your senior year, that's a huge wow for me. How, what made that possible? Did you attend like the SHIP conference or maybe the career fair at the university? What allowed you to have that opportunity beforehand?
Yeah, so the internship, to I guess answer it in two ways. The first way is how did I get my internship?
Hmm.
So I was a professional chair with the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, University of Michigan, as a sophomore, as a junior, sorry,
Oh,
as a
wow.
junior.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So, for those of you that don't know, professional chair, it's a role that takes a lot of time during the summer, and you start talking to recruiters to bring them to campus over the summer. So, I asked my vice president of corporate affairs at the time to see if I could handle Texas Instruments because I knew Texas Instruments was one of them that my interested or companies I was interested in. And then he said yes. So then I started emailing back and forth with a recruiter, which was a contact with the U of M, which I think helped. And then I also attended career fair and corporate mixer and visited TI at both times, which kind of showed my name a lot. Chandler, which is the recruiter, already knew me, but Don, who's an engineer and actually one who's has a pool and people getting in, also kind of like put my name out there so he sees me as well. So what happened after that is I think a week before starting classes or 2 weeks before starting classes on my junior year. So this was 2 years, 2.5 years ago. Wow. Um, they rolled out an event which was called Learn About the Job. And they told you to sign up. So I attended. And in the event, basically what you do is you just show up, you learn about the different TI calls it functions or roles that you can be in TI, and then you submit your resume when you basically submit your application, or not application, but registration, I guess, for the
Yeah.
event. So after that, I received back a interview offer, which they told us like submit your resume by then, get back an interview offer. It's kind of crazy side note because I haven't remember this in so
Uh-huh.
long. I haven't really had to go over this in so long. It's crazy that I'm now working here full time. So going back to the story, yeah. So then I went through. Actually, that happened. Then I went to corporate mixer and career fair. That's when I kind of showed my face more. And
Mhm.
then I knew already had my interview coming up. So my questions that I was asking career fair and corporate mixer were, how can I prep for the interview? Any tips you can give me? Any questions that can I know in advance? Like I straight up, asked them
Mhm.
that, which is what my upper or my mentors like suggested at the time.
Okay.
So I prepped for the interview, reviewed a lot of electrical engineering, circuits and things like that. Went into the interview. I thought I bumped the interview, but my first interview was in fact Don, who was the person I've been talking to actually for the past few years. But he's always gone to the Michigan events, and I made sure to show my face to those like last few days for career
Mhm.
for Cooper Mixer. So I thought I bumped the interview. I actually don't know if I did or not, but I got a call back for a second interview 2 days later. And I had my second interview with another person, and that one I thought I did better, but I still felt not
Yeah.
as good. And then I think a week later I got my offer.
Oh, wow.
So that's, I guess, to answer your question, how I got the option for the interview, or sorry, the internship.
Mhm.
And then yeah, I think I finalized my internship offer around December, I think. So I already had that. I kind of did that. Um, so it was through Shep because Shep
Yeah.
found out about this event, but it wasn't necessarily like a conference or anything like that.
Okay.
Like I had gotten a few of my other opportunities for my internship for junior year.
But so the whole
And then of
process,
course that converted to full time.
Mhm. So the whole
Sorry,
process lasted
go ahead.
from like June when you were like speaking with the companies all the way up until like December? What do you say? Or
To directly answer your question, the process went from mid-August up until mid-November.
okay. Okay.
That was
Was
a direct
this
answer. Now, I had been talking to
Mhm.
TI for since freshman year, actually.
Oh,
Showed
wow.
up to their booth and kind of showed my face and talked to them sophomore year. I actually got into their 1 week program to the prep for an internship, which I didn't do. I
Mhm.
declined because I got an internship, which I
Mhm.
preferred. But then yeah, so I think I had like, how do you say that? It's like poner el sofrito, ¿sabes? Like you start like the base, you add like
Okay.
the onions and
Little
the
by
pepper,
little.
you start like seasoning. Exacto. Like building it up.
Little by
And then I
little.
added like the meat.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of how it went with TI. And then, well, again, the full time, I got it from my performance in my internship.
How many internships did you have before that internship with TI? Did you have one every year?
Before the internship, strictly just one. Yeah. So I had one after sophomore year and after junior year, and then my full time when I graduated.
Okay. That's that's very impressive either way to have, I mean, already the fact that you had, I'm assuming your senior year was a lot more relaxing, hopefully, since you were able to have that full-time job secured ahead of time.
Yeah, I purposely did that. Yeah, because I wanted to have a more relaxed senior year.
Oh, wow. And it also shows, I guess, how rewarding it was that you were present with TI because you mentioned it was like since freshman year, and maybe I think some people you might not realize how impactful it is to actually like just show up at the career fair every time that they come, right?
Yeah, that's something that when I was a freshman, I wasn't too involved in SHPE. I think I only went to two events. But one
Okay.
of the things that everyone told me was if you want to get an internship, because I wanted an internship freshman year.
Okay.
But I didn't get one. I ended up doing something else, which I'm actually really glad I didn't get an internship. That's a side note. But yeah, all the upperclassmen were telling me, Andrea, go to corporate mixer, start talking to companies. You might not get anything, but it's good to just start getting an idea of what it's like to talk to a company, being under that pressure, showing your face. Also, knowing that many freshmen showed up, so you will give them a fresher view, basically. So, um, and when I showed up, everyone was telling me, "Oh, Texas Instruments, they're the best company to work for as an electrical engineer," and I was like, "Calculators, really?" For those of you that don't know, Texas Instruments is a huge manufacturer of semiconductors and chips. So if you think of Tesla, Apple, Microsoft, HP, anything basically, Northrop Grumman, SpaceX, all those companies use our chips to do their technology. So that's mainly what Texas Instruments does, not calculators. But again, my freshman mind thinking, oh my God, calculators? Okay. So I showed up, I embarrassed myself and told them, oh, I want to build calculators for you guys.
Oh my
And
gosh.
they're like, no, we do more than that. Yeah, we do way more than that. Here's a pamphlet. I'm like, okay. So then sophomore year, I researched them a little bit more. I understood a little bit more of what they did. And then I showed up, and that's when I got this 1 week offer, because TI doesn't hire interns, sophomore interns. We're very unlikely to hire sophomore
Oh,
interns.
okay.
But they do this 1 week program to train you for basically an internship junior year. So
Okay.
at this point, Chandler already had seen my face, Don had already seen my face, which again, those are the two main recruiters for TI
Yeah.
for Michigan at the time.
Mhm.
And then junior year, everything was virtual, but by being professional chair, I was in contact with Chandler a lot. So I exchanged, I would say, at least 10 to 15 emails with Chandler. So she knew my name, she knew my professionalism, my how I worked, right? Because like I kept talking to her about these different events that SHPE was doing, SHPE UM. And of course, I think that of course helped. And then at the end of the day, of course, my resume probably helped and everything adds up.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I did to be able to then achieve, I think, my my internship.
That's leading up to graduation. How soon did you know that you wanted to go straight into industry? Because it sounds like you had been working on it a lot ahead of time, but how soon did that come to you?
Do you mean if I wanted to pursue a master's or something like that, or
Yeah.
deciding to work full time?
Well, I guess, how soon did you realize you wanted to go into the industry, or did you think about a master's degree? Did you think about traveling at any moment? What were your thoughts?
Oh, okay. So yeah, so um that's several questions. So specifically the industry, semiconductor industry, I wanted to go down in that one because I love circuits. That's my passion. And when I was a student, I thought the place that you would mainly work on circuit design, PCB design, things like, or work with circuits through a semiconductor company. And TI was, I think, the biggest company in recruiting in Michigan, and also you had the SHPE connection. So I that's what basically why I went down that route and how I defined TI and in that industry. And of course, my internship solidified the fact that I love the company, and it really connects with my values and who I am as a person and how I work, etc. So that's the industry aspect. On the master's side, I considered doing a master's my junior year when I was a junior,
Mhm.
um, because I started learning, or just because I thought it would be. I don't really remember why I started considering it, but point is, I
Yeah.
did. And when I was an intern in TI, I really started considering it because I heard that if you wanted to be a designer for a chip company, right? So
Hmm.
like TI,
Like
you get your
TI.
master's.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I thought I wanted to design because I thought I liked circuit design.
Hmm.
Um, then what happened was that in my internship, I started learning what design does. My manager was actually an ex-designer, so he showed me around, and then I realized that I didn't want to do design as much. So I was like, probably a master's won't happen. But then
Okay.
I took my senior design class was designing a circuit, or not a circuit, a chip,
A
and I
chip.
hated it. I completely hated it, and
Wow.
a master's was basically more of that. So I was like, I am taking
No,
my full
thank
time
you.
with TI. Not doing a master's. Yeah, because to do what I wanted to do, which was PCB design,
Hmm.
not really like chip design, like where the
Okay.
electrons move and how the MOSFET or
You were more
whatever,
about the
all tech.
system. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
which is what I'm doing as an applications engineer. I actually just finished designing a PCB
Oh,
2 weeks
wow.
ago. Um, so it was pretty cool. But yeah, so then that's kind of my track on masters. So you answer your final question. So TI, when they gave me an offer, they originally gave me a start date in June, and I told them no.
Okay.
That's the one thing I was able to negotiate actually was starting in September,
Okay.
because I really wanted the summer one to myself, right? And
Mhm.
how I see it is I'm gonna maybe be working for the rest of my life. I have really no idea if that's gonna be the case. I'm never gonna get this long break anymore. So
Yeah.
I want that for myself. So that's why I requested a September start date. And they were able to give it to me. My manager approved it. So that was one of the reasons. The other reason is when I was a sophomore, I've always heard of this, like people going and backpacking solo trips. And I really wanted to do the one. I love traveling. You can kind of see it in the back. That's my travel wall, I call it.
That's
So it's like
very
the
cute.
maps of the world and the US and all of these different places I've been in the middle. But I love traveling, and I really wanted to do that when I
Mhm.
graduated. So I started saving up process from a sophomore, and basically I, collected enough to be able to do a solo trip for 6 weeks in Europe.
Oh, wow.
Uh, between my it was really fun between
That's
my graduation and my start date. So I had 4 full months of summer, which I do not regret at all, and I am actually 4.5. Extremely happy I did.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Where did you travel? Like, what areas did you visit?
yeah, that's a long list. So I am also very what's the word? I guess stubborn, you can call it that.
Okay.
Because I was like, or oh, in Spanish we call it like pata caliente. So like you
Okay.
cannot stay in one place, you kind of have to constantly move.
Uh,
And that was kind of my vibes when I was traveling. So I mainly did, you can think of it as Central Europe.
mhm.
So I really wanted to go to Barcelona and Rome. So what I did is I found the cheapest ticket flying into Europe, so into Lisbon. I then flew into Barcelona, then flew into Rome, and then I started taking a train for the next month of my trip.
Yeah.
And I trained from Rome all the way up to Berlin. So I basically went north, like yeah, north. So like
Okay.
Italy, Slovenia, Austria, and then, or sorry, yeah, Slovenia, Austria, Czech Republic, down through Germany from Berlin to Munich, and then I went west towards Switzerland, and then ended in southeast France.
That's a
Southeast?
lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, southeast. Yeah. It,
And
it was. It was.
this was a completely independent trip, right? You were alone, or
I
or
was
were you not
alone
alone?
for 4.5 weeks, 3.5 weeks.
Okay.
So I arrived. So okay, yeah. So I only had 2 days with my freshman college roommate. She joined me in Rome for 2 days, and my sister joined me for the last week, out of the six
Okay.
weeks.
Oh, wow.
But in Lisbon, I stayed with because I studied abroad, so I had
Mhm.
a friend in Lisbon. So I stayed with him for the 2 days I was in Lisbon, and then in Barcelona, my mom's best friend lives there, so I stayed with her.
Okay.
But I traveled by myself. I just stayed in their places.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um, it was still very independent, but it was
Yeah.
different because like staying in a hostel, sharing a room with completely randos.
Yes.
Um, which is what I did for the after Barcelona for the next 3.5 weeks. And then when my sister arrived, we stayed in hostels together. So it wasn't complete randos
Gotcha.
because I knew my sister.
Yeah.
But
No, I think it's still a long, it's a very long period of time. I mean, a really nice travel time, and to think that you were able to negotiate it. What, keeping that in mind, what kind of advice would you give to students graduating soon that I guess would like to get that sort of negotiation with a company as well?
so I am the worst at negotiation right
Okay.
off the bat. I think for me it's not really a negotiation. It's either this or nothing.
Okay.
So how I did that with them was, oh, they told me my entire, you know, package.
Okay.
And they told me a June start date, and I knew from my internship, my coworker from my internship had requested a September start date,
Hmm.
and I knew that was possible, and I knew they could do it. So what I did was that it was two reasons. First off, I told them I want to start in September because I really want to do this trip, and I've been wanting to do it since I'm a sophomore. It needs to happen,
Okay.
so make it happen. That was the first one. The other one I told them too was I potentially needed surgery in my hip.
Hmm.
I ended up not needing it actually, but
Okay.
I potentially needed it. So, and for me to my trip and surgery, I also needed the September start date. Like June was gonna be too packed, and it would just be better if they could give me the September start date. So they ended up giving it to me. Well, they talked, let me talk to your manager and see, and then we'll go from there. And that's what ended up happening. And my manager approved. So on that note, something that I've noticed too, also working now full time, understanding TI as a company and also seeing other companies from my fellow like people, my friends who graduated with me too.
Hmm.
It's also very company dependent, right? So a huge thing at TI, which I don't know how common it is among other companies, but a huge thing that I constantly see at TI is that they want to make you happy. And when they want to give
Okay.
you, if they can give you what you want, they'll do it. So that's kind of what happened with me, right? Like if September wasn't too complicated for them, like June versus September, let's just give it to her because we want to keep her happy and we want to give her what she wants.
Hmm.
And that's also something that I've noticed throughout my career with them so far, the past 5 months, and even in my internship. So it's also again company dependent, right? Um, in general, though, right off the bat, what I'll say something I tried negotiating my salary and my relocation bonus, and I was not successful. But what I do think, again, did not do a good job at all. But what I do think is if you want to get an increase in anything when it comes to money, I highly recommend you get a competing offer. Because that's the
Okay.
first thing that they asked me. They asked me if I had one, and I told them no. So of course, they knew I was probably going to accept their offer without it being
Yeah.
increased. Um, and again, that's also company dependent. Something that they told me is like we want to make starting salary for all TI employees fair or
Hmm.
equal.
Yeah.
So that was also a huge thing. I don't know if they would have even if I had a competing offer. So again, it's also very company dependent. But I know friends that have negotiated, and sometimes they're saying like, oh, fine, I'll do an earlier start date, but you have to increase my salary by this much, or I have this competing offer, what can you do to help me, or like, oh, like, can you please give me this benefit, or things like that.
Okay.
um but I do think a competing offer is probably the best thing you can have to really negotiate anything.
And I'm assuming you started the negotiation for both the the negotiation to both see if you can get paid more and also your start date. How early would you recommend? I'm assuming you should start negotiating that right when you accept, before you accept. What do you think?
So that I think one I would think 100% before you accept.
Okay.
Generally they give you like well, I got a 6 week decision timeline, or I think a month decision timeline. Generally, you get at least 2 weeks, I think. Well, actually, company independent, but I think 2 weeks I would say is the norm from what I remember. You want to do it before because what happens is after you accept, you generally sign a contract when you accept. And if you're signing a contract, you're telling them, yes, I'm okay with you paying me this, or you giving me this benefits or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So then why would they change it if you already signed that? So
Okay.
that's where I would be worried. I mean, I'm sure some companies would change
Yeah.
it, but that's just something to keep in mind. Something else, another mistake I made when I was negotiating, I really did not do the best job, but was I asked them for changes like 4 weeks before my acceptance date was due, like was
Okay.
coming up. So then that of course didn't give me time to really talk to them, see and figure out what I could do with, the offer. So
Hmm.
I would suggest maybe starting like a week in advance, if you can 2 weeks. Like if you have a 4 week period, maybe start 2 weeks in advance. If you have a 2 week period, maybe start a week in advance. So that's what I would do. I would recommend to not do negotiations as soon as you
Okay.
actually I don't know, but I think it's also good to just like research, right, what you're
Yeah.
getting paid and compare and then see what that industry offers in that location, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. um yeah, that's what I would recommend. That's what I would have done. But unless you for sure know, like for instance, you already have an offer, you already know they're giving you more, and like for the other offers for sure is better, maybe you can negotiate right off the bat
Yeah.
then. That's what I did, for instance, with my starting date. I As soon as they told me my offer, I was like, I want
Right
September.
away. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get any mentorship in that? Uh, both any negotiations you were making, and before you even had to decide, yeah, leading up to the point of, I guess, did you have any mentorship during the time that you received that offer since you got it so early in advance, and then during the time that you were negotiating your start date?
Mentorship for negotiating the offer in general, you
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
Um, no, not directly. I guess I would ask questions here and there in my internship. Like, for instance, I asked my coworker, we were talking about him starting, and he told me about September. That's something I kept in my mind. So I
Okay.
knew that. Um, when it came to salary negotiation, I didn't really seek for much because I honestly was not expecting the amount I got
Mhm.
for my starting salary. Just because it was also very exciting,
Okay.
from no money,
Yeah.
you're making money, and also, a California salary is significantly higher than, a Michigan salary, to put it that
Okay.
way. So I already got excited, and I knew and then I had my cousin lives out here in the
Okay.
Bay Area. So he was telling me, I talked to him, and he was telling me that with the salary that I had, I could live comfortably, not super comfortably, but comfortably. And honestly, I was just happy with that. And I hate negotiation, so I wanted to avoid it. But he did tell me that I could potentially try to negotiate the price. And he told me, if you, which for instance for me wouldn't work because I had to accept 4 days later, but it's like,
Okay.
if you give me an extra X amount more, I will sign the offer right now. That's something
I
you can do.
see. Okay.
So it depends with companies, right? Or you
Yeah.
can say, okay. So for instance, something I told my my HR person too is like, if you find like gaps in the contract. So for instance, something I noticed, I knew someone else who had graduated from Michigan too, who had gotten the same relocation bonus. We were both from Florida, and he was going to Texas and I was coming to California. From Florida, that's a significantly different
Yes.
distance. So of course it was going to be more expensive no matter what. And
Mhm.
also the tax, that's pre-tax. So the
Okay.
taxes in Texas versus the taxes in California were significantly different. Yet we were both getting paid the same amount of money for relocation.
I see.
Um, so I brought that up, and they told me, no, we want all our employers to be equal, which at least that still didn't make sense to me. But
Yeah.
I didn't want to fight it because I was happy with my offer and I didn't want to recruit, and I knew I wanted TI. So I was
Mhm.
just kind of like, it's fine. But for
Yeah.
instance, those are things you can bring up. And you can also, again, make the choice later, right? Like, for instance,
Mhm.
I noticed it still didn't make sense, but I still took it because that's what I wanted.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so, and then, yeah, from yeah, the mentorship I got was mainly from my cousin. What happened is after I got declined my negotiation, I talked to my dad. He's one of my biggest supporters in terms of also professional development and stuff. And he
Okay.
was telling me, why didn't you tell them you had, because I was talking to another company kind of at the time, just like very starting off. And he told me, like, why didn't you tell them you were talking to someone else? And I was like, I could have, but I didn't. So those are things that you can also bring up and potentially pull the ball in your direction. But yes, to answer your question, my cousin and my dad mainly, and
That's
asking mentorship here and there,
no,
some coworkers. Mhm.
that's really interesting. I mean, it's really nice to hear that you were able to have that family support and just also I think people it'll be a lot of good advice for the people listening to this podcast and watching the YouTube video to kind of keep in mind little details like say that you're speaking with companies, even if it's not like in depth with them, but that is something that could definitely make a difference. So I guess some of the other questions I had for you, Andrea, were I know you mentioned a little bit that you were very interested in like systems designing within circuits. Can you talk a little bit more about your current job? Is that something that you do on a day-to-day basis? What is it like?
Yeah. So my current job, that's a really good question. What do I do on a day-to-day basis? Okay, so to give a summary of what my role is, what it entails, the role of an applications engineer is to do customer support, right? And every time I've told that to people, they always think I'm the person answering phones and
Okay.
telling them how the calculators work or don't work, which is not the case at all. Um, so the customer support I do is supporting engineers to make our devices be able to be integrated into their device, or
Okay.
try to sell our parts to engineers as well. I'm not
Okay.
directly selling the parts, but I give the support to the customer answering questions. And based on my support and how good it is, and if I answer that question, it tends to lead to them buying our parts.
Okay.
So, another role or another title for applications engineer, you can call it basically the master of the part or the problem solver of the part. So
Okay.
any problems that come up with the part, you're the one that solves it.
Okay.
Specifically, I work with clocks and timing solutions, as you mentioned earlier. So the parts that I work with are the clocks, the things that are clocking the system, mainly a digital system, to map different systems together. So for instance, within a, let's say the brain of an autonomous vehicle, right? You have analog to digital converters, you have digital to analog converters, you have an FPGA doing all their processing, you have ASICs, you have Ethernet cards, or not Ethernet, sorry. You may have Ethernet, but you have data center card style things. You have all these different things. And you have all these different components, all of them, they have to be basically synced up. So when you process a signal and it comes in and it has to end basically at the same time. You can think of it that
Okay.
way. I am the person that gives you the tiny chip that is able to make sure all those devices communicate properly,
Okay.
or that the devices, or you give them a frequency to those devices that so they can operate at the frequency that they need, because a clock is also needed to measure data. So basically at every rising edge, right, or at every one you get from the
Mhm.
clock, you gather data. So that's basically the product I support. What I do is any questions that come, I don't know how to use this clock. What clock should I use for this application? I'm trying to sync up my this two different external devices and it's not working. Why is it not
Okay.
working? All those are different type of questions I answer. So yeah, so then that's like the main bulk of it.
Mhm.
The other way that you can answer customer supports is either through email, engineer to engineer, or E2E, TIC2E. If anyone's ever used our ports, you probably used our E2E forum. So I'm one of the people who answer the questions. And we something we do called or collateral and evaluation modules. Collateral is basically something we call app notes, which is basically a document explaining how our devices work, or how specific parts of our devices work, or answering a very common question that we always get from customers. That's the idea of app notes. And we draft them, we gather the data, we run the experiments, all of that. The other part, which is the reason that I chose an applications engineer role, is evaluation modules, or EVMs. And our EVMs are basically the PCB where our parts are, the PCB that contains our parts, so someone, a customer, can buy it and they can play with the parts and understand how the part works and its capabilities. So someone needs to design that PCB, someone needs to document how that PCB works, someone needs to test that PCB. Actually, I don't do the testing, that's validation.
Yeah.
But I design the PCB, the schematic, the layout. I make sure all communications done properly. I make sure, the right people are paid for all these processes of
Mhm.
generating the PCB. I come up with the document that you see online for that PCB. Yeah, that explains how to use it. So that's my favorite part, is doing, well, that's what I thought my favorite part was,
Okay.
which is PCB design. And that's why I chose applications. However, my end goal is actually to become a systems engineer within my team, which, as systems engineers, basically the product definer. So what
Okay.
they do is they talk to customers from several different applications that may need a specific type of clock, in my case, and then I determine what the next product is going to be, and then I oversee the process of it. Well, I, with the help of a project manager, oversee the process of it being delivered properly, and all the people are doing what they're supposed to do, and the chip passes all these tests, and it's approved by management and all these different things. So I define the product and I see basically its life
Okay.
until it becomes available. So that's what I want to go up to, and I chose applications role because, as I mentioned, applications is the role that you learn the most in. You're the
Okay.
master of the part. So the one that you learn most about the part, technical aspect of the part, how it works, why it works the way it does, the technical components. So for instance, I'm learning right now about phase lock loops, or PLLs,
Okay.
which is a huge part of electrical engineering, or a type of component within electrical engineering. So yeah, so I'm learning about that. And now I've realized that a huge part of my job is learning. And
Okay.
I absolutely adore learning. And not the type of learning you do in college, it's the type of learning you do, at least in TI. I have no idea how it is in other companies.
Okay.
But the really cool thing about TI is that you have this array of people, or even I call them tutors, to help you. You have like 8 tutors for one person instead of
Oh,
8 students
wow.
for one teacher.
That's really
Yeah,
good.
so it's really cool. And then any question that I have, I go and ask someone. I just cross over, say hello, good
Yeah.
morning, whatever. I don't understand this. And then they explain everything to me. And it's really cool because I can get the questions that I need answered. And I can make my learning my own.
Okay.
Which is great because in college they tell you what you need to learn. Here they tell you what you need to learn, but you also determine what it is that you're missing to really fully understand the part and fully support the product properly.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that I love about my job.
So I take it, quick question, I guess. So you came into that position, the applications position, because you really like learning and it's where you can learn the most. Is I guess was that did you have the long-term goal start here so that I can be much more knowledgeable or much more um in an area of expertise leading up to the systems engineer position?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so yes. So I there's 2 reasons why I joined the applications role.
Okay.
I don't like customer support. I don't like the lab.
Okay.
I didn't know how I was going to code, which is unfortunate, but that's okay because I also don't like coding. But I don't like the lab and I don't like customer support. But not I knew. After my internship, I talked to at least 2 people, 2 different people a week that worked in different areas in TI. And they told me that the best place to start a career if I want to get more technical was applications. Because think about it. When you
Mhm.
have a problem, you go ask the person that knows about the problem.
Yeah.
So the person needs to learn about the problem, understand the problem, and come up with a solution to teach you about the part. And to be able to come up with a solution, you need to understand the part. And who does all of that? An applications
The
engineer.
applications engineer.
So
Okay.
so from those conversations, I realized, and well, not I realized, they told me too, but I also realized if I wanted to become more technical, I need to become an applications engineer. So that's one of the reasons I joined applications. The other reason is I love, again, PCB design.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, which I'm realizing is not really the case, but one of the engineers that do a lot of PCB design is applications because they have to develop all these different EVMs. And again, I got to do one. I just finished one 2 weeks ago
Yeah.
for a product we're launching soon. So that's the second reason. And the third reason is when I was in my internship, I was scouting different roles to really understand which role I wanted to come full time. And everyone told me make sure you define that. And again, this may be TI specific, but a lot of people, hiring management, or that I kept meeting in my team, and recruiters, etc., told me that I needed to define which role I wanted to go into before I received a full time offer. Because after I receive a full time offer, even before accepting, that what says in the offer, it's very hard to change. So what I
Wow.
did
Okay.
is I started scouting different roles that I could do, and from the process from that, I realized that I really wanted to be a systems engineer
Mhm.
because that's also one of my career goals, or not career goals, my interests is I've always wanted to do product definition, and I'm very interested in innovation, but not just what pushes technology, but creating things from scratch and seeing
Okay.
a project develop and go from start to finish.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that's what systems engineer was. But the thing is, in TI, you cannot become a systems engineer as a new college grad.
Okay.
You have to go into another function and then become a systems engineer. My internship was in applications, by the way, so I already had that little bit of
Oh,
background in what
wow. Okay.
applications was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that helped obviously.
Mhm.
But then I realized that systems, you also need to understand the parts well, because you need to define the parts. So you need to understand what you have and what you need to define new parts. So again, everyone told me too that this I found out through my internship and didn't know it made sense, but the best role to become a systems later on is an applications engineer.
Applications.
So that's why I joined applications. So I joined applications knowing that I wasn't going to like it, but I
Mhm.
knew that at the end of the day it was going to give me the role that I wanted.
Okay.
And to my surprise, I actually do enjoy the role a lot because I
Ah,
realized that I love learning. And the only place you learn as an NCG,
applications.
oh, sorry, by the way, NCG is new college grad. Um, as a new college grad in TI is an applications engineer role. Because I've talked to my friends who are in validation, test, product, marketing, I think those are the main other 4 functions in TI that you can come in after
Okay.
graduating. They don't understand the part as well as I do. Like, for instance, I just submitted a proposal to give a presentation about Facebook loops to our field applications engineers, who are the ones that know a lot about TI parts, but not about one specific
A
part of TI.
specific part. Okay.
So I am teaching them about our technology so they understand it and they can support their customers better.
I see.
For and you can only do that in applications because your role is, well, also my manager. My role my first month was just learn. I was like,
Wow.
gotcha, I'll do that, you know.
How many job applications did you submit before? I mean, I guess at the same time that you were applying with Texas. So for Texas, you applied for the applications engineer position, only that one, right? Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, having applied there, how many other companies did you try applying with?
Yeah, so a little background on that. So how Texas Instruments does their internship program and then into full-time, not transformation, transition, is that if you perform in your internship good, you get an offer right away. You don't have to apply anywhere.
Okay.
Um, However, if you have specific requests, you do need to let your manager know, your internship manager know. And I think HR2 is probably not a bad idea. So when they draft an offer or they talk to HR to give you a full-time offer, those requests that you're asking are displayed on the offer. However, I do know, because I was considering going into a field applications engineer role. Um, and I think I needed to interview with some people beforehand while I was in my internship because I was switching roles.
Okay.
But what I did, I didn't have to interview at all because I was with a team in Tucson, Arizona. That was my internship team. And I wanted to stay in applications, but I wanted to be in California. I requested California as a location. And even though I'm in a different team that I was in my internship, I'm still within the same role. So they don't have to re-interview you, because I'm assuming for different roles, you need different skills. And because I was hired into an applications internship, I didn't need to be interviewed for an applications full time, even though it was a different team.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So to answer your question though, I for my full time I didn't apply anywhere after I got TI. In fact, I got 2 offers to interview with actually 2 of my top companies as a freshman, and I
Wow.
declined them because yeah, so things changed though throughout
Yeah.
college. Those I'm glad I am where I am, basically.
Yeah.
But I declined them because my choice was I want to enjoy my senior year. I don't want to go through heinous or horrible processes of
Mm-hmm.
interviews. So I decided to just stay with TI. I was happy with TI and I stayed with TI.
Mm-hmm.
But to get my internship, while I was talking to TI, I was talking to, I would say, at least 7 companies. And I had interviewed for at least 7 companies, I think including TI. So
Okay.
6 other companies, to get my internship.
Aside from the
Or
companies, okay.
sorry?
Aside from the companies you were interviewing with, so let's say around 7, how many other companies did you apply to?
Online.
Sure. Online or at the conference, I
So
guess in totality.
So applied online. Well, I guess pre-con. I honestly don't remember pre-conference how many companies I applied to. Probably all the top ones that I was interested in,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just something you should always do before conference. Apply to the companies you're interested in. Apart from conference, to be quite honest with you, I don't think I ever applied to a job position online randomly, unless
Okay.
there was some like I went to an event and they told me to apply, like for instance the Texas Instruments internship, or I talked to them in career fair and told me to apply, or I was going to conference and I was pre-applying to tell them, oh, I applied to this, you should look me up, you know. um and this is my thing on it.
Okay.
I'm not saying it is something that people should do. It's just that I felt, even though I knew I had a strong resume and people always told me, recruiters told me as well, I think freshman year, that's when I applied. I don't remember, but I remember that I got no responses whatsoever online. But I went to conference sophomore year or even career fair, and I got, or even corporate mixer as a freshman, and I got
Mhm.
interview offers or I got email backs that maybe we're in an interview, but we're a step closer to an interview
Mm-hmm.
when I interacted with them in person. I've met people who I have actually one of my college roommates, she applied online and that's how she got all her internships and her she actually got her full time from her last internship. But I didn't do that. It's just I think again, I don't know what was wrong with my resume because I'm assuming there's something had to be wrong if it never got pinged by the website. But I'm also a very, if you guys haven't noticed, a very in-person,
Yeah.
active, talkative interaction person. And I think that's one of my biggest skills and a skill that a lot of engineers don't have. So I think I showcase that
Mm-hmm.
in person always, or even virtually, right? Like in this,
Yeah.
as we're
No, I
recording
mean,
right
you're doing
now.
great.
Thanks, Maddie. But yeah, so like this more in-person interaction, I was always just better at it, and I think people can always feed off my energy, and when I'm trying to put my best foot out there, that's the energy I'm giving out. Because I was very successful when I went to conference in
Mhm.
person and when I did career first and even online I was always very successful. um but whenever I randomly applied to someone who had no idea who I was and just saw a resume, I
Yeah.
don't think I got a single response. Single positive response
No, it
from
certainly,
a single one, I think.
I'm assuming it makes an incredible difference. I've heard personally, I guess, that I think there were a couple of recruiters that came to our campus to speak with our chapter, and they were mentioning that when they had that human to human connection in person, it was like all of a sudden, I mean, sure, they look at you as an applicant, but if they can all of a sudden look at you as a colleague, it greatly changes the vibes between both people. So I'm assuming it definitely had to make a big difference.
Yeah, I
No.
guess to that comment, I will also add, I think a huge part of how I recruit and how I do things is I never really did the elevator pitch.
Okay.
I think it's a very good like cheat sheet to start off, right? It's a really good thing to always have in the back pocket and pull it out. But I always try to at least connect my experiences or my interests to the company. So I could potentially form a conversation out of it. And now looking back at conference when I was a sophomore, which I think was probably my most successful time when I was recruiting, um, I made sure to connect. I researched the companies and I would make sure to connect either an interest or a skill set, ideally both, to what they were doing and what I was looking for. And I think that's how I ended up getting. I was one. I think if not the one of the most successful attendees in 2019 for the conference. Um, because that's the other thing you kind of mentioned it. By you creating a conversation, you're also keeping them engaged, right?
Yeah.
It's not just this spitballing who you are and what you do because you're gonna get tired of it. You
Hmm.
need to, for instance, like how I got my interview with TI, I'm sure it was because even though it was emails back and forth between the recruiter and I, just by that interaction, the recruiter could see my professionalism, could see my communication style, could see that I'm driving things for this org, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then I think we met once through video, and then that helped too, of course, you know.
Hmm.
So I don't know. That's my take on it. That was
Yeah.
always my successes. So I didn't really spend too much time applying online. I would rather spend more time researching a company before career fair, or if I knew there was an event of them coming up, then I would go. Um, yeah, I'm literally thinking now in conference for sophomore year. I remember there was this one Qualcomm. I had no idea who they were,
Okay.
and they actually ended up becoming my top company when when I was recruiting for my internship junior year. And there was this event, this VR event, and I was very interested in VR. And I was working in an AR lab in Michigan.
Hmm.
And I showed up and I was just there. And of course, I also understood the lingo a little bit and the technology, so I could ask better questions. But I sat first row. I don't even know why. I was not even like trying to, get them to like me or anything. I just sat first row and then I was asking them questions. And at the end of it, I went up to them to ask them one specific question because the event ended. And the recruiter even asked me, like, I want to see your resume, you know?
Oh, wow.
Um, I
Right on the
started talking to
spot.
me, I just
Yeah.
asked for it, and then I was like, yeah, of course. And then I gave it to her, and then she's like, oh, we have this event, you should come to this. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Just because from like the interest and forming this conversation, right?
Seen.
Um, again, that's how I was. I mean, this is something that I always joke around with my friends too, but I even once got a recruiter to just ask for my resume from walking out from an interview. I did really well and I was smiling and I was really happy. And the recruiter asked me, "Oh, that went well, didn't it?" And I was like, "You know what? Yes, it did." And then he's like, "Oh, like who was it?" And then I started telling him, and we started talking, and then in 2 to 3 minutes of a conversation, he asked me for my resume, and I got an interview out of it, and almost an offer from it, just from a
Yeah.
smile, So just also, I think that's why whenever I went on a side note, but whenever I recommend notes to people, I highly recommend it's a huge part of personality and how you put yourself forward, you know? Um, but yeah, sorry, long-winded
Yeah. I
response.
think
I don't
especially
apply online.
I no, yeah. I guess I'm just thinking, because I've gone to the ship conference as well, and also the corporate mixers. And it also, I'm just thinking also, those are for the people that haven't been at conference or at the corporate mixers, there's usually a lot of students there lined up. So it's the recruiters are there all day, just like looking at resumes, one person after the other. So definitely, I mean, if all of a sudden you come with a great personality, lots of engagement, it definitely has to like hook them in one way or another. Yeah. No. Well, I guess the last question I guess I'd have is, do you have any words of advice for people preparing for life post graduation? I think we've talked about negotiations and maybe like interactions, following up with the companies. But what would be your last few words of advice?
Yes. So I think I have two, maybe three.
Okay.
Um, the first one is I know when you first get an offer, money and benefits and all of these different things that go into the offer are important, right? And of course they are, and trust me, salary is a huge thing when you're going full time to also be able to enjoy your life, live comfortably, and do the entertainment that you want to do. But I kind of mentioned it before, right? I had opportunities potentially to pursue interviews with this top companies that could have maybe given me better offers than what I got at TI, but I don't think I would have gotten the same experience that I have at TI because
Okay.
at the end of the day, I mean, it helped that I interned with TI, but TI has the same values I do,
Hmm.
or they really do believe in the values that they put out. Um, and I mentioned it before, like TI is a company that they're willing to give you what you want, right?
Okay.
And they wanna, because to keep you happy, that means you're more productive. That means it's more revenue for them. That's their logic. And I am not the only person that says this about TI. Like everyone that I've met at TI
Everyone.
says this. Yeah, literally everyone. But again, that's just a little shout out to TI. What I'm trying to say with this is, even though maybe it wasn't the highest paying job or anything, the company gives me work life balance. It gives me a team that I love. It gives me a great manager, right? And opportunities to grow as well. So I think a huge tip is, yes, look at the offer, but also consider what your life will be when you're at that company,
Okay.
right? Are you
Yeah.
someone that you want to work 12 hours? Are you willing to work 12 hours? Maybe you are for one company or for one project, maybe you're not, right? Ask those questions. Try to not even directly ask those questions because you may not get the answers, but questions that could potentially give you the answers.
Okay.
Um, so that's something that I highly recommend, right? Like look past the numbers and more into what your quality of life will be and if you want that quality of life. I guess now I'm thinking of several. Second one is don't be afraid to ask. For instance, a lot of people were shocked that I got a California offer after my internship or a September start that it's because I wasn't afraid to ask.
Mhm.
Same thing when I even started full time. Um, I currently even talk to my coworker about it sometimes, is that she's not as vocal as I am, and she
Okay.
hasn't gotten what she's requested. For instance, like me going to Dallas for my second rotation, by the way. I'm going to Dallas for my second rotation, which is not as common, actually, not at all for the rotation permit in, but I did because I asked my manager if I could potentially relocate somewhere. Because the worst that's gonna happen is no, like they're
Yeah.
not gonna look bad on you. They understand you're also human, and I think that's a huge one. Like, speak up, right, and speak for yourself and be advocate for yourself, and also set limits, right? If you are not willing to work more than past 5 or 6, right, or whatever it is, and set that clear expectation, right? Um, like tell your manager who you're also a worker to.
Yeah.
So those are two things. And then I think my last thing, which I think is the most important one,
Okay.
is that I think I did hear, but I'm not sure if everyone really has. When you move states, which is my case, and you go to a completely new place that you don't really know people, or you may even know people, when you're starting a full-time job, something that I've realized, and I've also, a lot of my friends have corroborated this, it's not like college. It's not like you reach college and you're in this freshman dorm filled with freshmen who want to become friends, or even sophomores and juniors who are still looking to potentially change their friend group or find new people or whatever it is.
Okay.
When you reach full time, like your coworker or your friend can be a 50-year-old. That is completely
Okay.
valid, right? You're a 22-year-old, in
Yeah.
my case, 20, almost 24, but your coworker could be 50 and you could love that coworker, right? Your coworker could have kids
Yeah.
and you talk about their kids and that's normal, right? So then I'm saying this because you are joining an area with people with lives. So it's completely up to you to form a life in your new location, right? You can
Okay.
either do that completely through your job. A lot of jobs offer new employee networks that you can join, and they host events and you can meet new people. But it's up to you to form friends and form friendships and go out there and do your hobbies, because now you have time to do hobbies. Shockingly, trust me, there's something brand new information for me. So I'm dealing with that right now. And it's like, okay, now I have time to do all these things. What do I want to do? What do I want to prioritize, so I can also meet people with my same interests and also form a life here? So you have to be very much more proactive in
Okay.
creating friendships in a life than it is college. And I think that affects a lot of people when they move. Which, and also the limits aspect of things. I think a lot of people sometimes set limits and don't set limits, and then they think they have to work when that's not the case.
Mhm.
Um, and then that kind of swallows them, and they're not able to create a good life for themselves. So I mean, it's time for you to explore, get to know you as a person, as an independent, right? As your
Yeah.
own, with your own money, doing your own thing in your own space. So I just kind of celebrate that and take advantage of that. I think that's for sure my last piece of advice.
No, I think that's a really very beautiful piece of advice. Yeah, I mean, being in college, I mean, everything you're just, I think everyone's always same age group and everyone's like, it's like so easy to make friends or they just come out of nowhere. But especially the age difference, um I think it should be common sense, but it's not something that people generally, I hadn't thought about it before. I hadn't processed that before. So, but it's like, yeah. Um no, well, thank you so much for that piece of advice. I really appreciate it. I know everyone that's viewing this is, especially the undergraduates, they're really going to be in awe about your advice. I guess with that, we have reached the end of our conversation. But before we go, I'd like to thank Andrea again for being in our inaugural episode. Um, you gave a lot of advice, you shared your story, and we loved hearing about that. For our listeners out there, if you have any requests for any future podcast topics, or this will also go on our YouTube, just you can reach us at our ship eboard email, and you can also contact us at our LinkedIn. So for the ship eboard, it is ship SHPE UOFM eboard@gmail.com. Be sure to stay tuned for our next episodes. We will be releasing them every Monday, and we'll be discussing with new graduate students. Um, Next episode will be with graduate students, and each episode will have a different alum. So until then, go blue and have a great day.